get a lot of personal trainers and strength coaches coming to me for help in writing articles. They want to write better blogs. They want to write for fitness magazines, write for some of the major fitness sites, and they ask me about, how do they go about writing a good article, help with their articles, and something a lot of trainers struggle with. So I'm certainly not a born writer whatsoever, but practice makes you better at anything. But I want to give you my 3 tips for kind of a strategy, I should say, almost like a formula that I go through when I put together articles. So if you ask me how to write a great article, these are the 3 steps that I go through, the 3 criteria. And if they work for you, great. So number 1 is in the intro, you want something that catches the reader and tells them, kind of summarizes the article, but mainly tells them what the benefit, why they should take the time to read your article. So one of the things that I like to do is create a problem. I'll say, which is one of the reasons why I'm writing the article anyway, to solve a problem that I see that's out there, or at least share my solution to the problem. I'll say, oh, well, people think that this does this, but really that doesn't happen, and this is what really happens, and in this article I'm going to show you why this is a myth and what the truth really is. Something like that. But something that tells the reader, hey, this is why you need to sit down and read this article, and this is how it's going to benefit you. That's number 1. That's in the introduction. And get there fast. No fluff and puff. That's kind of a side tip. Number 2 is cover these criteria. If you cover these criteria, you will tell the readers pretty much everything they need to know and nothing that they don't need to know. You want to say who, what, where, how, why, and when. Right? Who it's for, when to use it, why to use it, when to use it, and how to use it. Right? That's sets and reps. That's also the techniques and applications. If you cover those, I think that's 6 things, who, what, where, how, when, why, 6 things. So if you cover those 6 things, you will pretty much answer the application questions, all the application questions before they're asked. What I mean by application questions is, well, when do I use this? Should I use this before this or after this? Or, should I use this 1 day a week? That kind of stuff. That's all answered, so cover those criteria. The last one, those used to be my 2 criteria, but as I got familiar with writing and seeing the reactions to writing, I took on this 3rd criteria. So it was kind of the one thing that I was missing early on and only learned it through a lot of experience, is that you want to think about all of the potential rebuttals that you may get from other, everybody's an expert, from other people. So basically people who are going against you, what they will say, what your opposition says. That's the word I couldn't think of. What would your opposition say to this point or that point? That's a good thing to think about. Actually, Charles Darwin has a whole chapter in his book, Origin of Species, about what his opposition might say. And one of the things that made him such a great scientist was that he always thought about those arguments. So I would say to be a good teacher, be a good author, communicator, you want to think about what other people may say. Now, of course, there's going to be people who come up with these crazy, ridiculous arguments that have no foundation in science or evidence or whatnot. You don't have to address every possible person with every possible nutty idea and who thinks they're an expert. However, it's nice to address some of these things because it saves you time from having to address them in the comments section, right? So, for instance, a practical example of this is an ex-intern of mine, Dan Blewett, who happens to write for T-Nation right now, fantastic strength conditioning coach. He came to me early on and sent me a rough draft of one of the articles he was writing on, I think it was like overrated exercises or something like that, and had box jumps in there, and he was talking about how he's not really into box jumps and some of the problems with him. It's all in the article. It's already published on T-Nation like a year ago. And the first thing I told him, I said, great article. I said, but I can promise you that a bunch of people are going to read this and say, well, Joe DeFranco does box jumps. And obviously Joe DeFranco is a very well-respected, very knowledgeable strength coach who's had a lot of success with the combine and whatnot, who has lots of videos of athletes doing lots of box jumps. So that's obvious, and he writes for T-Nation as well. So I said, you need to address that in the article. And he addressed that in the article and addressed other things, and nobody tried to ding him on it because he had already pulled the rug out from those comments. So that's a really good way to disarm some of those things. Now, I'm going to reveal one of my secrets of how I figure out sometimes what my opposition may say. This is kind of how I use Facebook to benefit me in writing better articles. If there's a situation, if there's something I'm going to say where I'm not really, I can't really think of too much that the opposition might say, or I think I've got a pretty airtight argument, I will actually take that quote and I'll put it on Facebook. I'll just assert it on Facebook, and I'll see what my fitness family says. And of course, you're going to have two types of people that comment: either the people that think that's the greatest thing they ever heard, or the people that think that's the dumbest thing they've ever heard. The people in the middle are just going to hit like or not say anything. So out of those comments, I will read those comments, and I would probably say it's 1 out of 50 that I think is pretty reasonable. Sometimes 1 out of 100. But sometimes there are some good comments, and I go, that person's got a great point. They took me to task on this, and I certainly need to address this in the article. And if I don't agree with what the opposition said, at least I know, especially if I see it come up like a few times, like 2 and 3 people kind of say the same thing, then I know I'm going to address it right in the article and pull the rug out from underneath that contention because I've already addressed it. So those are my 3 tips for writing great articles. You got the intro, you got the body, which is the who, what, where, how, why stuff. And then within the body or post or however you thread it in there, you want to try to disarm as many of the counter arguments with a preemptive as you think you can get. And I gave you a way that I find out some of those arguments is I just post some stuff on Facebook and see if I get any reasonable replies, things like that.